Welcome to another edition of Globetrotting 5. In this episode, we are going to discuss the latest round of turmoil in Bangladesh. As you may know, over the last 48 hours, Bangladesh has seen another round of violent protests which have targeted multiple sites in that country, including Bangladesh's two top newspaper offices belonging to the Daily Star and Prothom Alo. In fact, in one incident, the protesters targeting the Daily Star office set it on fire, trapping many journalists for hours in their burning office. Fortunately, those journalists were rescued and nobody was harmed. However, the protests go to show the deep turmoil that Bangladesh is currently facing. But the big question is, why now? After all, elections are due in Bangladesh in February 2026. Well, the latest round of protests appear to have been sparked off by the demise of Osman Hadi. Now, who was Osman Hadi? Osman Hadi was a student leader who rose to prominence after the July 2024 uprising that led to the ouster of former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Hadi had been shot by unidentified masked assailants just last week. He was in a critical condition and shifted to Singapore for treatment. However, he was not able to survive, and it is the news of his death that sparked the latest protests. But what is interesting to note is that the protesters, while they went on a rampage and attacked the offices of the two largest newspapers in Bangladesh, and even targeted some facilities related to the Indian diplomatic mission in Bangladesh, although not major damages were reported there, the protesters were actually accusing India and blaming India for Hadi's death, because they have been saying for some days now that Hadi's assailants had fled to India. But all of this is without any proof. There is not a shred of evidence that India had anything to do with Osman Hadi's assailants. In fact, this is something that New Delhi has clarified. It has said that neither is there any truth to these allegations, baseless allegations, nor has Dhaka provided an iota of evidence to substantiate any claim that Osman Hadi had been killed by people related to India. So these allegations have been completely cooked up just to blame India and perhaps derive some political mileage. Now, why do I say that blaming India, as is being done currently, is aimed at deriving political mileage? Well, as I said, that elections in Bangladesh are due in February 2026. And the student leaders who led the protests in July last year against the Hasina regime, they have floated their own political party. And these student leaders are going to contest the upcoming elections. So now we have a situation where there is a third force in Bangladeshi polity. Now, this third force of student leaders are trying to establish themselves in the firmament of Bangladeshi politics. Now, this is not going to be easy for the two big parties in Bangladesh, the BNP and the Awami League, have very strong roots, especially in the rural areas. The new party formed by the student leaders, if they have to make a mark, they need to replace or replicate the structures of the two big parties, namely BNP and Awami League. And that is certainly going to be an uphill task for them. So they need an agenda, they need an issue to galvanize their supporters. See, it's one thing leading a mass protest, which they did successfully last year against the Hasina regime. But it's a completely different thing to actually get involved in electoral politics and try and run a government in future. You need a proper party structure, you need roots, you need institutions in the polity of Bangladesh. That is something that these student leaders presently don't have. What they have is a hold on the interim government in Bangladesh. So they have access to power at the moment. But that access to power ends as soon as elections happen in Bangladesh in February 2026. So let's look at how things are setting up at the moment. On the one hand, you have Tariq Rahman, son of Khalida Zia, returning to Bangladesh on December 25. This will be a huge boost for the BNP. On the other hand, you have Awami League, which is suspended for the moment. However, as I said, the party has deep roots, it has supporters, it has local units, and they are quietly trying to assert themselves ahead of the elections. So even though the party is suspended, it has the structures, the cadre to assert itself. And now, with the third force of student leaders who are trying to create their own space, you have a situation where Bangladeshi polity is going through a very big churn. And the student leaders appear to have zeroed in on the strategy of targeting India. That is their main objective here, to create space for themselves in the Bangladeshi polity between the two big parties, between Awami League and PNP. And how do they plan to do it? By targeting India through their anti-India rhetoric. That is what seems to be their ultimate goal here. So this is the situation in Bangladesh, and this is why we see this increasing rhetoric, anti-India rhetoric, playing out in Bangladesh today. But will this strategy actually help the student leaders? I don't know. It's a very dangerous strategy because India and Bangladesh, we are neighbors, and we have long history. There is no escaping the fact that India and Bangladesh have to find a way to work with each other. So all this anti-India rhetoric that some of these student leaders and their supporters are engaging in, that is not constructive for India-Bangladesh long-term relations. But we'll see how things play out and how the elections in February 2026 they play out. However, we must remember that the political situation in Bangladesh has a huge bearing on India as well, particularly India's northeast. And we have elections in Bengal and Assam coming up next year. So India will be watching developments in Bangladesh very, very carefully. Finally, let us hope that the situation in Bangladesh stabilizes. Let there be conducive conditions for the elections in February 2026. Let there be stability in Bangladesh, and hopefully the election results and the situation in Bangladesh becomes favorable to once again have good relations between India and Bangladesh. With that, I would like to end this episode. See you in the next one.